Hey, my name is Jared Moon, and I'm part of a group of underground athletes you've probably never even heard of before. We don't rely on fancy equipment for training, and most of us don't even have gym memberships. In fact, our motivation comes from within. You see, we have jobs, families, and responsibilities, but we still have big goals, and they aren't getting achieved at a Globo gym. For that reason, we have to do things differently. Our training has to be smarter. We don't have every piece of equipment known to man or a ton of time to train, and we don't need it, because we are achieving amazing things without it. So how do we do it? If you ask your average personal trainer or gym goer, they'd call us crazy. Yet we're seeing results better than most every single day. And it's happening by blending mental training with physical training and becoming an athlete. What we call and welcome to Garage Gym Athlete.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season 5, Episode 2 of the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. If for some reason you missed Episode 1, we are not doing interviews this go-round. We are just diving into some topics that we think that can make you better. Season 6, we will be back with a lot of new athletes interviewed and discussed about being a Garage Gym Athlete. So today, what are we getting into? We're going to be going over warm-ups, 1-rep maxes, and not dying. That's the three important topics that we have for Garage Gym Athletes. Like, we get a lot of questions about when 1-rep maxes come up, how to tackle those. Also, a lot of questions about warm-ups, how to get them done in a quick amount of time, but also still thoroughly being warmed up. And I also think that has a little bit to do with what time of the day you train. But we're going to hop into these a little bit more because safety is very important when we talk about those 1-rep maxes. But let's start with warm-up because I'm going to kind of throw this one to Joe because he is a personal warm-up king. Like, he's great at warming himself up, before he hits a training session. So I'll let him give some tips, and I'll throw in some of my own as well.
Yeah, so how I usually go about my warm-up and how I've seen it work and be done best before is everybody knows to get your heart rate up first. But are you just getting your heart rate up to get your heart rate up, or can you do a combo of what it's going to help for the workout? So if I'm doing a lot of running that day, I know my calves and ankles and stuff are going to be used more, so I'll probably jump rope for 2 minutes or so. If I'm doing a lot of pulling, so deadlift, cleans, then rowing is really good to do about 2 minutes. I also, every once in a while, and I encourage people to throw in there, instead of, most people just do a 500-meter row. I'll challenge people to up that to a 1,000-meter row at least once a week because, when you go to row, it'll just feel like it'll take less time. But you'll get nice and warmed up. And if I'm going heavier, then I'll go it longer. Then the air dyne. Air dyne is where we use a lot more than the rower, only because, say yesterday I did front squats. I start off legs only for a while, for about 45 seconds, and then I go to work my arms in, and then for another 45 seconds, and then I go back to legs only because I know, okay, I'm doing front squats. My legs really need to be limbered and blood needs to be flowing. And then the opposite comes for the press days or heavy push-up days or something like that. I'll do arms only for a little while and then just do the regular. So get your heart rate going and get blood flowing to where the workout is going to be centered around. So that's why you need to, just like we covered last episode, look at your workout ahead of time and make sure you are getting the right mindset, getting prepared for the right things. After the heart rate, I move on to prepping those same muscles, same things of the area that I'm going to do. Usually, no matter what, I'll hit some air squats just because I like to be limber there. But either air squats or I'll do a few laps around the backyard of walking lunges. No matter what, most days we're doing something lower body centered, whether it's squats, deadlifts, any kind of cleans, stuff like that. If not, pulling other days, you really want to get, if you don't have pull-ups, then a lot of days, even most days, I will do a hanging shrug. So you just hang from the bar and then retract your shoulder blades back. But you just really want to warm up those same muscles, and it's just kind of up to you to how you want to do this. So flowing through two or three different things, and even our warm-ups, we will have 3 or 4 different exercises that you can see that we run between.
Yeah, ours are very dynamic in nature. We don't really, and that's, kind of do's and don'ts. I'll just hit on this real quick. If you had something else, you could continue. But you can do a lot of like dynamic stretching. Joe's talking about hitting specific target areas. If you want to roll out your shoulder with a lacrosse ball, or just do arm circles or something, to get your upper body warmed up, that's fine. But what you shouldn't really do, especially if you're going to be lifting, is long static stretching. That shouldn't be done right before you are about to lift, because your muscles elongate and it takes them a while. It's different per person, but it takes them a while to kind of snap back to the tension that they normally hold. But it's a fine line, because you don't want there to be so much tension in the muscle and it not be warm that, you pull a hamstring if you try to sprint or, do a deep squat, but you don't want it so warmed up and so loose that, you just did like a 30-minute yoga session and you can barely, you're wondering why you're not hitting your numbers on the back squat, and it's probably because you over warmed up that muscle. So there is a fine line. Keep it dynamic in nature. What does dynamic mean? It just mean moving. You can kind of do quickly, explosively, toe touches, butt kicks, things like that, to make sure that you're warm, but without doing anything like, static, long duration.
Yeah. And I also like to kind of prep the core. So inchworms are perfect for this. Just walking your hands out. And as you walk your hands out, just holding a plank for a little bit and just getting your core fired, because a lot of the lifting that we do, to do safely and efficiently, you need to have your core turned on, your abs, your back, whatever it entails. So turn on your core. And then just to segue for, the stretching, I don't do the stretching. I do some mobility and some smashing. So I know I need, I have a little bit of a hip thing. So I know I need to smash my hip and my glute a little bit and do some hip bridges to make sure that my glutes are loose and firing correctly before I go and hit the squat.
I'm the same with my shoulders. Like if I'm doing anything overhead, all this warm-up stuff is great, but I basically have to roll a lacrosse ball on my deltoids for them to be prepared to properly press overhead. So, because you can do the whole arm across the body, but there's not a lot that you can do for your deltoid and stretching it. And sometimes you just need to smash, and do that with whatever your favorite implement is.
Yeah. And then the last thing, or kind of the last thing that whenever I was in a regular gym, I almost never saw people do, is warming up with an empty barbell, no matter what you're doing. I do it. I always do it with a deadlift. Even squats, press, everything. I always do one set of 10 with an empty barbell, perfect reps as best as I can, because going through it, you don't need to do it explosively or fast, just going through normal reps and doing that. I know when I do that with squats, I can feel it a couple reps in, like, okay, I can feel my hip a little bit tight here or my quad a little bit tight here. Because then after you do that set and you're just muscle memory, for your good form, you can also go back to your smashing and smash that area to loosen it up a little bit, so that when you do add weight, you'll just be much more efficient and moving the weight better.
Got to grease that groove. Get your body in the right frame set, should I say, instead of mindset. But so two kind of principles there. Joe hit on basically all of them, but I'm going to kind of maybe put one of them in a more principled format. So he talked about warming up, get the blood moving, right? Well, that's just a principle that you should think about before you start targeting. Another reason that's important is that is how your body heals things. That's how it heals muscles. That's how it heals ligaments, tendons, is getting blood in and out of an area. That's why those those e-stim, devices or whatever, they pump blood in and out of a particular area, because blood flow heals. It brings in nutrients. It takes out bad stuff and just puts in the good stuff. It's a real simple process, right? Blood flow is really good for your body. And so that's one thing that you're doing. It's also great for recovery. We are not hitting on cool down as much, but cool downs are really important if you have the time for it. Just getting on the rower and doing 1,000 meters, letting the blood pump and circulate through your body, as opposed to just being, toast at the end of the workout and laying down. You want blood flow, as much blood flow as possible, really throughout your day. That should just be a principle. And another thing Joe mentioned he seems to do a lot of is unilateral movement. I think is super important in your warm up. So he mentioned lunges. Lunges are a great example of doing something like that. Also activating your core. But anytime you're not activating both limbs at the same time. So an air squat is great, but a lunge is better, or a pistol is better. Pistol might be a little aggressive for some people in the warm up because that could be a strength building exercise. But anytime you can just fire one muscle group or one leg or one arm or whatever, because that's also going to help you mentally trigger if something's feeling a little bit off. Because if you're going to get injured under a barbell, say in a back squat, and all you did was 10 air squats, and then you're hopping to 135 pounds and you're going to increase from there, had you done like a lunge, you might have felt that your knee was like feeling a little bit weak or weird or off today, right? But you wouldn't feel that if your left leg was compensating for your right leg during your air squat warm up. So it's really great to do unilateral stuff, and that's a pretty simple concept for most people. Is just apply as much of that as you can, either kettlebell pressing overhead for a warm up, lunges. There are a lot of different ways that you can do that, and anytime you can get your what was inchworms you mentioned. Like the inchworm is so great because it kind of stretches you out a little bit. And also that really helps. Like if your lower back for some reason was killing you when you got to the top of the inchworm, that might be a red flag that you need to either warm up that area a little bit more, or something's off. Maybe you shouldn't go heavy on the deadlift. The warm up is kind of like letting you know how things are going to go too. If something's feeling off, do you need to adjust your game plan for the day? Do you need to switch your workouts up altogether? Do the long run today and do the deadlift, switch them out or something like that. So the warm-up can tell you a lot of things about your training that I think everyone should pay attention to.
Yeah, stability definitely is good to do. You mentioned the kettlebell press, and a couple cycles ago we were all doing bottoms-up kettlebell presses a lot, and those are really, really good for getting ready for overhead presses.
Activation everywhere on those. That's like yeah. It's like the weakness, like shows you where all your weaknesses are at, like real fast. Like grip strength, or do I have no core muscles, or my shoulders weak? Like I love that exercise.
And then when you warm up to heavy, then it goes without saying that you need to start out with lower weight. I know there's been a couple of times where we've programmed, say 80% at like 3 reps, and people will ask like, oh, do you even do warm up sets, or do we jump right into 80? No, you never just jump right into 80% of anything. You're going to warm those up. I know, especially squats wise, I need to take a lot more time to warm up because I really want to make sure that I'm getting my depth and everything is firing properly. I do a lot of hip bridges before to make sure my glutes fire, just isolating that muscle. So those are just some examples.
And don't skip it. Don't skip the warm up. These are two things. If I could come out of your phone, out of the app, and grab you, is like, don't skip the warm up and don't skip the abdominal or core work. We call it the daily in Garage Gym Athlete Programming. Don't skip it. Like I can see completion reports of all of our different things, and the warm up doesn't always have a completion, but the ab stuff always does, right? And so what people are always, and I've hit on this every season, I talk about all the time, people are always for some reason skipping out on doing a couple sit-ups or a plank or front leaning rest or toes to bar, or whatever we had programmed, because they got short on time and they're like, screw it. And it's fine for a cycle or two. It's not fine over time, because your core is going to weaken and it's going to be bad, but it's going to be a slow process.
Everything is going to break down.
All right, let's move on to 1 rep maxes. This is a question we get asked a lot. How should you properly tackle a 1 rep max? Now, this was just not that long ago. If you guys if you're kind of in the Garage Gym Athlete community, we have a pretty awesome Garage Gym Athlete Instagram account. You can follow us at Garage Gym Athlete. There are other guys doing Garage Gym stuff who are pretty popular. There's Garage Gym Reviews. They are another popular Instagram account, and they're obviously way more about equipment and reviewing equipment and whatnot. To be honest, I don't know how that guy even fits all that equipment. I think he must sell things or give them back or whatever. Because 90% sure he probably gets them for free and then reviews them and, I don't know, sells them or whatever. But anyway, he posted on his Instagram account. Someone messaged him in Facebook. He wanted the information to be shared that some guy, I think 30-something years old, 32 years old or something like that, was bench pressing in his garage. I don't even think he was going for a 1 rep max. I think he was just, going really heavy for that day, and his shoulder dislocated, crushed his neck windpipe and he died. Had a young kid, was married, so died in his garage gym just trying to train, just trying to get his sweat on, get a little bit stronger. And it really is serious. Like it is. Like I take safety very seriously, having been in some precarious situations more than a few times, because I've been a garage gym athlete for a long time now, and you can get lazy. Sometimes you don't think you need it. Like, I've been training here for this many years and that thing's never happened, so I'm just not going to set up the safety bars this time or whatever. But you should always have a spotter or safety equipment in place, preferably both if you could. And I say that in like almost every athlete brief when we're going heavy, because nothing that we're doing right now is worth your life. None of our training, none of this, none of your performance metrics or how you look when you're naked, none of that is important, compared to you surviving the training. So this stuff is really important, being safe in 1 rep maxes. But let's kind of talk about how to prepare for 1 rep maxes. You kind of talked about warming up, Joe. Is there anything that you do in particular or recommend athletes do to get prepped differently for a 1 rep max versus just, say, a heavy back squat day?
So I pay attention to every little mobility nuances or anything tight, anything that I might feel, and I will smash it to make sure that I just smash it to make sure that everything is moving how it should. And I actually do a lot of, I posted this, I think last week, so people do it in warm-up maxes. I do a lot of sets. I don't really worry about my muscles fatiguing. I'll rest a good bit in between, but I do a lot of sets to warm up to that 1 rep max to make sure everything is good. Because sometimes it takes 5-6 sets to even like feel, because I'll still be at like 75%. And it's like, man, this is a really, really heavy. But as I keep adding and warming up more, like all of a sudden 85 feels better than 70 did, just something like that. So don't be afraid to do more sets. Hopefully you have the endurance that you'll be fine with it. But I smash and keep loose for a lot of that. And this is when training your core also comes really big into play, and people always ask about belt wearing.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
Okay, well then I can let you kind of.
I'm sure we both have our own ideas, theories on belts, but when do you bust out the belt? I'm sure it's similar.
Yeah, 80-85%.
Yeah,
typically. When it's getting really up there, I try to go that long because I want to be able to keep my core tight enough to support that weight, and a lot of times I can, even close to 90. So it's in part to make my core stronger to be able to do that, and I just don't want to have to lean on a belt too early.
Yeah, and this is the question I get asked most often when it comes to 1 rep maxes about belts. So I absolutely do think that you should wear a belt. That is my opinion of the belts in training. I do not think you should wear one all the time, like Joe was saying, just like an ankle brace or a belt or gloves or whatever. Like, things are going to become a crutch, and your body's not going to learn how to do things properly. You're not going to learn how to brace properly, engage your core properly if you're always wearing this belt that's super tight and you're not having to think about a lot of things. So let's just talk about belt usage. Our first, where should you get a belt? You should get a belt. They're going to last you for a long time if you buy a good one. And I recommend getting a pretty thick one that is the same length all the way around and doesn't have, it doesn't narrow around your belly. A lot of people have belts like that. They're not as effective, kind of negates the purpose of what a belt is for. So what a belt actually does, you're supposed to leave it, like, if there was a notch that it was its tightest, you're supposed to leave it 1 notch looser than that, because you're supposed to actually brace your belly push against the belt. And what this does is it forces the air in your diaphragm to tighten the belt out, and this also puts pressure on your spine to hold it in place. And so now you are properly braced for this lift. A belt is not there is technique to using a belt, and I just basically mentioned all of those things. You could dive into them a little bit more if you want. You could even Google weightlifting belts into 3 Fitness, and you can see an article. I wrote on it before. But you don't just put a belt on, tighten it as tight as it'll go, forget about your abs, and just like squat. Like, that's not how a belt works. It's not this magical tool, but it can add some serious poundages to your lifts. I've tested this thoroughly, like not belted, like going for 1 rep maxes. And another thing I like to hit on with belts is wear it on the strict press. A lot of people think they don't need it on the strict press because they think that a belt is like protecting your lower back on a deadlift. I don't know where that, maybe because like they see guys at Home Depot wearing those things or something like that. But that's not what a belt is for in weightlifting. It's not just to protect your lower back. It's to protect your spine and to teach you how to brace. So use it in the strict press. Use it in the bench press. Use it in every heavy lift that you're doing, and it will give you more poundage to that lift. If you're afraid about it being a crutch or whatever, the only times I really bust it out, like Joe said, 80, 85%. Sometimes I only bust it out for 1 rep maxes because sometimes I want to challenge myself. Like, okay, how does 80, 85% actually feel without a belt? And then if I start getting up into the 90, I'm for sure gonna bust it out just to be safe. But belts are very important when coming up to a 1 rep max. Now training programming wise, Joe mentioned doing lots of sets, and that's typically how we program it. Now, you could do a set of 10. Just make sure that you're going light. Like he said, hopefully you have the muscular endurance to not get burnt out. Kind of know yourself there. Like if you're okay with more volume, that's fine. But there's a fine line of, like Joe can handle that. Maybe some other athletes can't do a set of 10, a set of 8, a set of 6, a set of 5, a set of 3, a set of 2, a set of 1, 1, 1, attempts, because you would just be too fatigued. But yeah, Joe and I might be able to handle that just fine, doing a bunch of sets. So know that where that line is for you. But typically, my recommendation is minimum 3 attempts at your 1 rep max, unless you epically fail or hit a big PR. And this is where kind of psychology comes into it a little bit. If, say, my squat max was 400 pounds and I'm getting to my actual testing, I'm done with my warm-up sets, and I get to my testing of the lift. So say I was like, okay, my first attempt, I want it to be 405 because, that would be PR. I hit the PR, but say it felt easy. My next one, maybe I bump up to 425, 420, depending on how easy it felt. I have a lot of experience, so, I can make those decisions. So say I hit 425, or maybe I hit 430. So that's a 30-pound PR, on the day for that lift. I'm going to call it right there. Even if that lift felt good, not super challenging, but it was hard, it felt like a good 1 rep max, I'm going to call it at a 30-pound PR, and I'm going to move on. Like, when you're like, okay, well, let's bump it up to 450, this is when those really bad failures, okay, I'm getting in safe, all of that kind of stuff comes into play. And you also, you don't, if you had 2 successes and you're calling it a day, that's a great psychological note to end on, as opposed to ending on a failure, right? Like, you'll still be, because you're a human being, you'll still be a little bit pissed that you failed your last lift. You'll be like, okay, 405 PR, 430 or 425, 430 PR, and then you go, okay, I'm going for 450, and then you fail, and you're like, shit, I failed that last one. It's like, what, you expected to get a 50-pound PR today? Like, you should still be happy that you got a PR. So normally, if you get a good PR, call it quits. I used to have a coach who, if I got his thing was if I got a 2-pound PR, I had to call it quits for the day. I never liked that, so I say within reason, especially if you've gotten a lot stronger. And then the other part to that was failure. If you just have an epic fail, don't just keep trying and trying and trying. Just admit defeat. If that happens to you, most likely won't if you're following our programming, religiously. But if you were 400 was your squat max, and then you just failed epically at 405, but you wanted that 5-pound PR, don't try 405 9 times in a row thinking one of these times you'll get it. Just be done, try and maybe max or match what you got previously and move on, or try something lower just to see, okay, I did get weaker. What point, where am I actually sitting now? So those are my 2 recommendations on the programming and execution side.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, the only time I really had to retest the same weight for a PR was actually the last time I did the back squat back in June, and I got my 10-pound PR, and I think I sent you the video, and you were like, nope, not low enough. So I was like, damn it. So I waited 5 minutes, and I had to do it the same weight a second time to make sure I was low enough. But it wasn't an epic fail, so that was, yeah.
Yeah. standards are standards. So, but no, that's awesome. So I think that's it, man, for warm-ups and 1-rep maxes. Like, be safe with that stuff. The second rule of the garage gym is don't die. The first rule is don't have more weight, or don't have enough weight that you can actually lift. Don't ever be stronger than the amount of weight you have.
I think I'm actually in violation of that. I mean, I am really, really close, but if like Liz and I are both, well, I think Liz and I can barely squat at the same time now, and it's like every single thing we have, depending on how heavy we go, but we can't deadlift heavy. So
you got to get more weights, man.
I need to get a plate.
You have kettlebells though, right?
Yeah. See, I have the thick bumpers, so like a kettlebell couldn't even attach on there. I couldn't even hook it on there.
You could get creative. So put a
kettlebell on top of the bumper.
No, so I actually did this before I got more plates. I did a kettlebell on a small chain in the middle of the barbell.
Oh.
So yeah, it's like a really small chain with like a clamp set in the middle of the barbell, because that way it's balanced, right? And you could just add it. You try it out.
I don't even have two kettlebells of the same weight.
That's what I'm saying. It goes in the center of the barbell, like the very center of the barbell, so you don't have to worry about.
So it's in between me.
Yeah. It's like in between your legs, basically. You have to make sure your feet are wide enough to where they won't get smashed. But yeah,
I just think I wouldn't take myself seriously, and I couldn't get the lift in.
That's some old school stuff that I did. I actually have pictures of that. I think in the Garage Gym Athlete book, like just getting it done.
Jeez.
But yeah, that's it, guys. That's all for episode 2. Be safe.
Speaking of PRs, the highlight.
Oh,
people.
Dude, did I totally miss it? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's highlight our athletes.
So we just want to really get that warm up, and the deadlift or the 1-rep
just
max.
Rushed it right in there.
Yeah, we're just really excited. But something that we did last episode that we're gonna do in this season are highlighting the people that have just hit a whole bunch of PRs doing our trainings. We just did Fit Week the other week, and Nicole Kenley had a big press PR. Then we have 2 athletes that have been with us for a couple of cycles, and a couple of people have gotten back-to-back PRs on what they do. And it's one thing to join a new program for 12 weeks and hit a PR, because like, okay, in new training, I should be able to advance in this. But to do it back-to-back in big lifts, Kevin Lane added 15 pounds to deadlift this past cycle, and before that added, I think, 15 the same as well. So back-to-back 12-week cycles, adding 15 pounds to deadlift. And Tyler Brandon went up 25 pounds the first time, and I think 20 pounds the time before that. So I think he added about 55 pounds to his deadlift or I think it was back squat back-to-back cycles. So that's kind of awesome. I just wanted to call them out.
That's awesome, dude. Those are like the best PRs, because if you come into our training brand new and you're hitting up a 12-week cycle, and maybe it hasn't been super structured, or maybe you're just doing CrossFit or your own programming or anything that's not our programming, you're basically going to hit a PR. I can almost guarantee it. You'll hit a PR in some way, shape, or form. But to do it multiple cycles, like you're saying, that becomes way more challenging. And that's a lot more on the athlete than it is the programming. And so way to be consistent, and not only consistent, but committed. Because you can't, after a couple PRs, you can't check the box anymore. You have to, and we'll talk about that in one of the episodes this season, but you can't just check the box anymore. You have to be like dialed in mentally to continually hit those PRs and put in the right intensity every single training session. So good on them. Awesome. And sorry, I forgot. We'll keep doing those at the beginning of this season. All right.
Just changed up curveballs this year.
Little curveball. All right, man. That's it. Until next episode.
See ya.